The COVID inquiry was today shown some of the foul-mouthed messages sent by former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon during the pandemic. She branded Boris Johnson an effing clown. Am I allowed to say effing on the television? I don't know. And described his performance at Prime Minister's questions as effing excruciating as he announced the second lockdown in England. Joining me now is Scottish political editor at the Sunday Times, John Boothman, who is, I'm sure, horrified at the language. John, my goodness me, very trenchant comments by Nicola Sturgeon. Explain who she was sending them to and the context thereof.
One of the things that's happened at this inquiry over the past week, this is day 8, is there's been a huge amount of anger among bereaved relatives of people, 18,000 of whom died in Scotland during the pandemic. They've been very, very upset at what's been called the industrial scale of deletions of WhatsApp messages. Much of that ire has been directed at Nicola Sturgeon, who we can see there on our screens. Yeah. She's deleted all her messages. Now, curiously, some messages have been recovered. The messages we heard today were from her Chief of Staff, Liz Lloyd, her main political confidant, who was giving evidence. And we found in that, well, maybe one reason why she didn't want us to see lots of these messages. I should say I was slightly amused in what is a very serious subject to see in the front page of the UK COVID inquiry website a message saying occasional strong language may form part of the evidence. And that's what happened today. She called in this message Boris an effing clown. She said, as you say, his performance was excruciating. His utter incompetence in every sense is now offending me on behalf of politicians everywhere, Nicola Sturgeon said. Now, it has to be said for anybody who knows Nicola Sturgeon, she's kind of pretty direct, intimidating sometimes. She doesn't suffer fools gladly. I've known her for a very long time. There's a great expression, a Scottish one, that's her nickname being used to describe her. She's called a nippy sweetie. But we never thought she was really a big swearer. And we're getting a bit of that today.
And also, I just keep thinking about that announcement, you know, of the second lockdown. And I think there are many adjectives one could use and maybe even a few expletives possibly better deleted. But clown, I'm not sure about that. Why does she say that? Do you think that that would resonate with your fellow Scots, what her verdict was of his performance that day? Because it didn't really seem to me like a performance. It seemed like a reluctant, rather sad, you know, kind of abashed kind of proclamation that he didn't really want to make and had to make. I didn't think clown was an accurate or valid way of describing it particularly.
I think maybe Nicola Sturgeon thought that that would chime a bit with Scottish opinion. Boris Johnson's approval ratings in Scotland, to say the least, have never been high. But look, there's a bit of a background to this. You know, relationships between the former First Minister of Scotland and Boris Johnson when he was leading the pandemic were never cordial. Boris Johnson himself said they were friendly. When asked today about this, Liz Lloyd said, well, there was never really much of a relationship to speak of. So I think there's a bit of that going on. In that email exchange, Nicola Sturgeon also said that, you know, Scotland or politicians in Scotland were not getting the credit for how good they were. I think she meant in relation to performances, communications during the pandemic itself, where certainly in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon was more appreciated then than Boris Johnson was. But as I say, there has been an awful lot of anger this week over these WhatsApp messages in particular. Gold command meetings between Scottish ministers and senior civil servants before cabinet meetings. These minutes were not kept. Other ministers as well, right, have deleted their messages in the next week. We're going to hear from Nicola Sturgeon herself a whole day next Wednesday, our Deputy John Swinney, and we're also going to hear from the Health Minister, Jean Freeman, as well. So it's got a long way to go, and I think we're going to hear an awful lot of this. Civil servants have been caught up in it. Dr. Jason Leach, who was the National Clinical Advisor to the Scottish Government, he said he had a pre-bed ritual every night of deleting his messages. So if you want to get to the truth of what happened during the pandemic in Scotland, why things were done differently, then these messages, particularly for the people who are bereaved, they want to see them.
Absolutely.
And I think that's reasonable. Hamza Yusuf, the current First Minister, former Health Secretary, was up this afternoon. He apologised in front of the inquiry for the lack of these messages. He's apologised twice at First Minister's questions for it, saying it was not the Scottish Government's finest hour.
John, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you. Thank you.